Eating 100 grams of carbs at the end of your meal instead of during your meal will cause a smaller insulin response, but it's still bad for your health. I know that that sounds like a contradiction, so I'm going to explain. There was a 48% drop in insulin response just from changing the order that we eat the food on our plate. That's not a small effect. That's actually a significant number, right? That number is from a real clinical trial out of Weill Cornell, and it explains why this hack has been floating around the internet for the last few years, at minimum 2. What's making me make this video is that the conclusion from this real experiment is that we can eat what we want as long as we eat protein and vegetables first. So we don't have to give up dessert. We just need to eat the fun stuff at the end, like we've always been doing. Sounds too good to be true. Please subscribe. Protein and fat entering the stomach trigger CCK and GLP-1. CCK slows down how fast our stomach empties into our intestines. GLP-1 has 2 jobs. It signals, well, in this scenario, GLP-1 has 2 jobs. It signals the pancreas to release insulin, and it also slows down digestion even further. When carbohydrates enter the stomach, they are broken down with like little delay. Like they enter, they're broken down, and then GIP is released. And so GIP is responsible for like 60%, so 60 to 80% of the total insulin release after a meal is GIP. So it actually causes a bigger response than GLP-1. At the same time, the glucose from the food is being absorbed into the body, so into the blood actually, by the gut lining, which triggers beta cells to release even more insulin. So there's insulin coming from everywhere, okay? Our body is actively processing carbohydrates faster than protein and fat. Like this is an active process. This makes a lot of sense since carbohydrates are toxic in large amounts. So let's take a look at what happens if we eat protein and vegetables first. Weill Cornell ran some clinical trials to look at the impact of food order in insulin and glucose. And the study we'll look at today, and we'll look at more than one, but like the one I want to focus on right now, compared eating carbohydrates first, and the carbohydrates were ciabatta bread and orange juice. And then 15 minutes later, the person had skinless grilled chicken breast, lettuce and tomato salad with low-fat dressing, and steamed broccoli with butter. The exact same participants, a week later, ate the exact same protein and veg meal first, and then they had the exact same carbohydrate meal second. So they just switched the order. This is one of those truly perfect experiments because I am my own control. The results showed that insulin was 48% lower when carbohydrates are eaten last. The glucose response was 73% lower when carbohydrates were eaten last. These reductions are comparable to taking diabetic medication, Wellness Warrior. And these results were replicated several times with similar results. Similar. This real biological reaction was taken to mean that the order that we eat our food in can save us from insulin resistance and help us with weight loss by many of the doctors and influencers that have been discussing this on the internet. That this is a solution, a real one. But Wellness Warrior, I see huge issues that we need to discuss. 5 of them, to be precise. The first being who the participants in this experiment were. Every single participant across every one of these studies was already diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. Everyone was already carrying excess weight. Nobody healthy was tested. Now this matters because a metabolically healthy person's insulin usually peaks like within an hour of eating and is most of the way back to baseline or to normal, right? Within 2 hours or like 2 to 3 hours. In the original trial, Insulin was still climbing at the 2 hour mark in both conditions. So whether you ate it first or second, neither group had even peaked yet. We actually don't know how either curve would have resolved itself. So this research isn't showing us how food order affects a normal, healthy body. It's showing us a modest adjustment layered on top of a pre-diabetic system that's already in trouble. That's a very different claim than what's presented to us when we watch these videos. Issue number 2 has to do with the actual meals. Everything about the meals makes no sense. First of all, the idea is that eating carbs first or last has an impact on insulin levels. So, Wellness Warrior, we know that all plants are carbs. Eating protein, if you're new here and you don't know that, all plants are carbs. So eating protein and vegetables together means that you are still eating carbs first in the carb seconds example. There were carbs in both parts of the experiment. Now, my next issue is that the chosen carbs were really weird. Who eats plain ciabatta bread with a glass of orange juice? Most people would have either put butter on that or maybe cheese. Like both of those things, butter or cheese, have fat. Now, maybe you would have added jam. I guess that's a possibility. But nobody would have just eaten plain ciabatta bread. Like nobody would have. I don't think anybody would have done that. The chicken breast meal with lettuce and tomato salad with low-fat dressing and then steamed broccoli with butter is the meal that we force ourselves to eat when we're dieting. It isn't the meal that we happily have on repeat when we go out with friends. This experiment didn't give us a realistic look at what we might pull backwards. So because we're putting our carbs last. So what would I pull out of my typical meal? Because I go out and I have pizza or I go out and have burgers. Am I taking the bun off? It doesn't give us a realistic look at what are we pulling to the back to eat last. And it also doesn't give a realistic look at a meal that we would actually be eating to try to replicate these results. And that played out in the videos that I watched on this topic, by the way. The instructions were to just eat protein and vegetables first, and then you can just have your carbs, no issue. What carbs are people having? I doubt it's dry ciabatta bread. Most of us are eating rice, pasta, or French fries in our meal, right? And if we're going to have something after our meal, it's ice cream or cookies. Or that ties into another issue that I had with this study. We eat normal meals. That means that we're eating carbs, proteins, and fat mixed together in the same meal. Only the second time this experiment was run did they add a version where they had the mixed meal. And basically, they took all the things that people were eating at the 2 15-minute marks and combined them into a sandwich that they were eating. Although carbs still won, these results were much less extreme. So first of all, no study ever replicated the 73% results. So that's the first thing I want to point out. That first study had huge numbers. None of their follow-ups were able to replicate it. But second of all, in this study, rather than 54% advantage for glucose, when you did the mixed meal to the glucose to the carbohydrates last meal, it fell to 22%. The flip-flop they did served to exaggerate the difference. And I say flip-flop, I mean like carbs first versus carbs last, with not having the mixed in the middle, exaggerated the difference. And it didn't even do it for every single study because no one else was ever able to replicate it. It does not actually reflect what typical people do in real life. We cannot expect to get a 73% reduction or a 48% reduction for insulin because we were never eating carb first like that to begin with when we're talking about food. We do eat carb alone when we're talking about sucking on a lollipop or drinking a soda, but not when we're talking about eating a meal. When we compare eating carbs last to the reality of how most people eat, the difference is much less impressive. although it's still there. What we all need to keep in mind is that comparing the best case scenario to the worst case scenario rarely gives regular people actionable steps that they can take. These are interesting thought experiments, but they don't reflect actual life. Researchers present this data as if reordering our food is something we would do because it's easier than not eating carbs at all. We would still need to change the way we eat, something we obviously struggle to do. That's the first thing I want to say. How many of you heard about this and actually tried it? If you did, I want you to let me know, right? How long were you able to keep doing it, right? And if you did do it, did you lose any weight? Because the researchers actually acknowledged that the order food was eaten had no change on how much weight was lost in their own lab results. The third problem I want to talk about is a sentence found in these papers, just sitting there, stated but not examined. In the 2019 study, it said, adherence to a low carbohydrate diet can be challenging for patients. Food order is an alternative strategy. Translation? Cutting carbs works, but people won't do it. So here's something they might actually do instead. This sounds reasonable when you just look at it on face value. We certainly cannot force people to do something that's hard and that they struggle with. But no one asks why adherence is hard. It's stated as a fact, and we move on. It's hard, and we just move on. Adherence only means something if the instructions were actually given in the first place. Most of us were never told that reducing fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, and grains would help us to lose weight and improve our metabolic health. But we've all been told the exact opposite. The food nutrition guide, medical advice, and information we get from nutritionists and trainers all point to fruits, vegetables, and grains being healthier than meat. Tell your doctor you're vegetarian and there's no conversation to be had. Mention that you want to try keto and there's straight warnings about the damage that you're going to be risking. So calling this an adherence problem is laughable, wellness warriors, laughable. This is an information problem. We haven't failed to follow the advice. It was never given to us. And this is what makes food order seem appealing, right? The modest results look like something that people might actually do because somewhere along the way, doctors and researchers and the dude next door decided that us women wouldn't do the real action that would solve our health issues. We're too weak to not eat junk food and to not eat rice and potatoes and pasta. Not just helps us slow down progression, wellness warrior. Putting down carbohydrates solve it, and they don't think we're going to do it. Before we move on, these studies did this stupid thing twice. In each study, they tracked glucose and insulin for 2 to 3 hours in pre-diabetic and diabetic people, when their own research showed that the curves would not resolve within that window. So they weren't going to get the end of the curve. And once again, they named the issue as if it absolved them from creating a better research paradigm. This pattern was seen throughout the study series. None of them went long enough to capture the actual data. The next problem is very subtle. Very subtle. The fourth issue is that free fatty acids don't just trigger their own insulin response. So, when our body is struggling with insulin resistance, which will be the case in diabetics and pre-diabetics, right? Fat amplifies the body's insulin response to sugar. This makes the meal served in this experiment very interesting. Low-fat Italian dressing and skinless chicken breasts, which keeps the fat content very, very low. There are so many problems with this, but I'm going to try to stick to the ones that are specific to this experiment. If you want to know about the others, I want you to watch the video that I'm linking at the end, because it's going to go into the other problem that I have with this. But the problem in this study is that nature gives us protein and fat together all the time. So when we eat real food, protein, animal fat come together. In reality, most meals come with fat. Burger and fries, pizza, pasta with sauce, rice and meat all come with fat. Even our beloved low-fat dressing has some fat in it. So rather than respect what type of meal the average person would be eating, even a diabetic, they've served participants a restrictive diet meal. And I don't even know if these were only women that were... Okay, wait, let me check. Okay. The first two experiments were almost even, so men to women. The third experiment was 73% female, and then the fourth one was 60% female. So, okay, wait, now I have a new question. Were the meals calibrated to ensure that the men got enough protein? Because chicken breasts and there's no fat, and there's no fat on it. I mean, okay. So were the men's meals larger than the women's meals? Let me check. Okay, so none of the studies calibrated the meals based on the individual. That's the first thing I want to point out. The final study separated people into two categories, 2,100 calories and 2,600 calories. But you just got into a category. So obviously, anyone who was you might be overeating, you might be undereating, but you're in a category. So makes me think that these were reasonably sized meals, just because now I know there were 2,100 calories and 2,600 calories, but still missing the fat for the body to be able to use them properly. Like I said, check out the video at the end. Okay, my problem here is that diabetics and pre-diabetics are already primed to overreact to fat. Had they given participants a regular dressing and chicken legs, let's say, to eat, or even if they left the skin on the chicken, the results might have been meaningfully different. Their bodies would have plausibly reacted to the fat in the meal because of their insulin resistance. Wellness warrior, we really have to question why they chose to go with a diet meal when what they were trying to prove was that the order of the food mattered the most. If it really mattered so much, show it by giving people a normal meal and letting the numbers talk for themselves. There's one number in the research that barely got spoken about, but is the main reason anyone would even pay attention to what this study was studying. So they tracked insulin down to the milliunit. They ran the glucose curves out to the decimal point, and they weighed participants before and after trial. We heard all about the impressive insulin results. They were proud to publish the glucose results. What about the weight? Well, it turns out that eating carbs first versus eating carbs last had zero impact on weight loss. Remember, they're comparing the same person to themselves, two different conditions. So there was weight loss, but it was stable across conditions. No boost based on food order eating. Wellness warrior, that's backwards. Insulin and glucose are markers. Weight is the outcome. When the outcome doesn't move, but the markers make the headlines anyway, that tells us something about what's actually being sold to us. That would be the same as if these researchers told us, well, buy the generic Frosted Flakes so that it will save you money. when we're trying to get weight loss. It's going to save us money, but it's also going to ruin our heart, and we're going to keep gaining. It doesn't make any sense. The insulin numbers are real. The glucose numbers are real. Nobody's disputing the biological reactions that were measured. But the numbers on the report aren't the same as a solution. They measured weight, but didn't get the weight loss outcome that they were expecting to get based on the insulin and glucose numbers that they did get. If eating carbs less actually replaced the need for fewer carbohydrates in your diet, the weight data would have shown it. It didn't. What we're left with is a real, measurable effect on a marker dressed up as permission to keep eating the same way we always have. That's misleading. They're acting like that insulin drop at that moment is the destination. But that's not even true, because the length of time insulin is on is sustained while the sugar that is present gets cleared, and it stays longer, right? Because it's slowed down. Wellness warrior, I'm not going to be a hypocrite here and say that I've never spoken about food order, because I have. I speak about it because it can be helpful under the right circumstances. The truth is, if you're eating a keto way of life, you've already decreased your carbohydrate intake enough that your body is not overloaded. In that scenario, making sure that you always complete your meat, fish, poultry, eggs before you complete any carbs that happen to be on your plate gives you the best chance to notice you are satiated before you complete the fun stuff that you had on your plate, because every single carbohydrate that you eat is for fun. That means that you have the best chance to eat less carbohydrate. That's it. Those carbs are impacting you whether you eat them first or last. I'm not pushing some hack to allow you to eat chocolate cake. It's a way for you to be able to make sure that you eat the food, meat, fish, poultry, eggs, and keep the entertainment that you're putting on your plate to a minimum. That means that if you're already keto today, yes, keep eating protein to veg, right? Protein first, make sure that's finished before you finish the vegetation. Keep doing that. That's the way that you can actually feel that you've eaten enough and not just finish your plate out of habit. And if you haven't started keto, like if you're not on the journey yet, hello, I'm Violet. I love meeting new wellness warriors. Thank you for being here. I have a gift for you. Go down to the description and take my free course. It's going to help you to start keto so that you can get your health and your life back. Everybody else, click on this link to go to the video to better understand why we need to eat fat with our protein. So you click on that link and I meet you over there. And thank you so much to all the wellness warriors who support the channel. I'll see you guys in the next video.